How can the Broncos make the most of their game against the Bengals? This is your Denver Sports Daily for September 29th.
The biggest stories, the latest news. It's Denver Sports Daily.
Broncos have been gifted a great opportunity to get some confidence back after starting the season 1 and 2. Now, a couple weeks ago, I was saying that this stretch of 3 games, the Chargers, Bengals, and the Eagles, were likely going to be losses, all 3 of them. But now it doesn't look like that's the case because, of course, Joe Burrow is out. Joe Burrow is not playing, and we saw what just happened to the Bengals last week where they were blown out by the Vikings by 38 points. So this is a game where the Broncos have a real opportunity to get out there, get some confidence back, and show what you're made of. Show that you are not a scrub team in the middle of the pack in the power rankings where they have you ranked 14th in the league. You go out there and you show that you're one of the best teams in the NFL right now and that the playoff hopes and the Super Bowl hopes are realistic to talk about this season. And the Broncos can do that. They can definitely go out and do that. And of course, that comes with the Bengals star offensive leader, Joe Burrow, being out. And of course, them coming off the back of a 38-point loss. You're looking at a game that should be overall great for the team, but really great for the defense. You have a real gifted opportunity to go out there and show that this defense is one of the best in the league. And I expect them to play like that. And honestly, I've kind of realized just pulling myself out of everything. I like to do that and just kind of look at where I'm looking at games because I've got orange tinted glasses on. I want the Broncos to go out there and beat them. But am I looking at this as too much of a gimme game? I think maybe. But watching what the Bengals have been doing without Joe Burrow, watching what they've been able to do in the past without Joe Burrow, it hasn't been successful. So are the Bengals going to be able to put up a fight with this Broncos defense and Broncos offense? No. And especially the Broncos offense, because the Bengals defense is known to be one of the worst in the league. This is the game that I'm going to be watching and looking at for Bo Nix. Is Bo Nix going to be able to play at the level that he played at last year? Plus. The level he played at last year, plus a little bit more. This is your second year in the league. People are talking about, there are whispers of sophomore slump. Go out and show those people. Go out and show me that sophomore slump isn't happening. It's not happening to this team because he's going to go out there and he's got a chance to go up against one of the worst defenses in the league and really put some points on the board and show his arm, actually be able to connect on some of those deep balls that he wasn't able to connect on last week. If he can do that, if he can show what he is, then I feel a lot of the fear in Broncos country right now will be alleviated because I'm going to be honest, I'm nervous. This is not how I expected the Broncos to start the season. I wanted them to start 2-0 or 2-1. I get the loss to the Chargers, real unfortunate. It ended in a field goal, and you pull yourself out of that for a second. And you realize it could have been much worse. You only lost on a last-second field goal. You take that against one of the best teams in the league. You can take that. But the Broncos need to use this game as an opportunity to show what they're capable of, to show that winning the division is still alive, especially about after how the games shook out yesterday. The Chiefs ended up winning. The Raiders ended up winning, but the Chargers did not win. You have an opportunity to go out there and start evening up the score in the standings in the AFC West, and this is that game. This is that game to not only even up the standings at a record point of view, but also even up the standings in a points total overview, because you look at the point spread, you look at what the Broncos overall points for and points against are, they can really take a jump here against a terrible Bengals team. If they do what the Vikings did last week and beat them by 38, then we're talking about the Broncos in a whole different light tomorrow. When I come back on the show tomorrow and talk about what the Broncos did in this game, we're going to be talking about, hopefully, how they're now solidified as one of the better teams in the AFC West because of how much they beat the Bengals by. Not only because they beat the Bengals, but because of how much. So you got to focus on your points for and points against, because that is really where it's going to come down to, especially with the AFC West being so tight. We could see in Week 18, the Broncos ended up getting by because of the records in the division, the records against other opponents, and then the record when it comes to the point spread there. Now, moving on, the Buffs suffered an upsetting loss at the hands of BYU. The Buffs had a lot of energy going into their first ranked matchup of the year, but unfortunately, they fell flat after a very hot start in the game. The Buffs immediately jumped out to a 14-0 lead thanks to some incredible footwork from Caden Salter running out of the back door and then still somehow being able to squeeze and slide his way into the end zone, and then a great run attack that set up a touchdown for Draylon Miller. A great first few drives for the Buffs had me feeling very confident that they were going to be out there winning this game, but it ended up falling apart. Now, the Buffs ended up holding the lead all the way into the second half, but that's when the game was flipped on its head. BYU looked like they were on a mission in the second half, scoring a touchdown in the third quarter to make the score 17-14. They went on a 17-0 run to combat the Buffs' 14-0 run on the first two drives. And then they scored another touchdown in the fourth that ended up being the final nail in the casket. But the Buffs couldn't keep up. They were only held to one touchdown in the second half, and that came in the third quarter to take the lead back, but it wasn't enough to get there in the end. CU ended up getting the ball with a little around 2 minutes remaining. That was around where it was. But Caden Salter, honestly, he cracked under pressure. He cracked under pressure and threw an interception in his own half to seal the game for BYU. He rolled out to his right and just threw a really, really bad ball. You know, at that point, when you're watching it, if you can watch the play, I recommend going out there and watching it, because most people will say exactly what I said in that moment. Throw the ball away. You know, it's second down. You have no reason to throw that ball into that coverage behind the receiver. It was a terrible pass. It was a terrible, terrible pass, and it ended up sealing the game for BYU. They lost on that interception. Now, Caden Salter overall recorded 168 total yards and 2 total touchdowns on 11 for 16 passing. So overall, not a terrible game. He did have that interception, but he didn't look bad. He just didn't look as good as he looked in the previous week. But his offensive output overall wasn't enough to combat the run attack from BYU. This is the same thing that we were saying last week before the game started. Stop the run game from BYU. Stop the run game, hold them from that, make them pass the ball. And they were doing a fine job at that in the first quarter and the second quarter. Through the first half, the running attack for BYU wasn't hitting the way it had hit before this game. But overall, when you look at the end, the box score, BYU ended up as a team rushing for 208 yards and a touchdown. That was the biggest threat to the team, and you let them get what they are good at. You let them get their 208 yards on the ground and a touchdown. That's going to kill you every single time. You let a team run 2 football fields on you just on the ground, you're going to lose the game. Now, after this, Colorado has fallen to 2-3, and it looks like their bowl game hopes might have gone out the window as the upcoming matchups only seem to be tougher. It's really upsetting how that game ended, and you'd hoped that they could go out and get a ranked win, put themselves on the map, get ready for TCU next week, and they weren't able to do it. They just weren't able to do it. It happened at the end. Caden Salter had an opportunity to have a legacy drive. You know, final 2 minutes, you get down the field and score a touchdown and win the game. Even a field goal ties the game, but nope. Throw an interception, and the game is over. Now, that'll do it for Denver Sports Daily. Hopefully, the Buffs can get back to winning some games, but really unfortunate how that one ended. But luckily, we've got a lot to look forward to tonight as the Broncos are taking on the Bengals. I've got them winning by a lot. I really think it's going to be a 10-point win at least for the Broncos. Good morning, Joey. Good morning, Roy. Always good to see you in the show. Happy Monday. I see a Broncos win, but I think it's going to be closer than people think. Maybe. I mean, closer than people think can mean a lot because, I mean, if we're looking at what the Vikings did last week, winning by 38 points, and the Broncos only do half of that and win by 19, that might be closer than some people think, but it's still a big win. I think it might be like a 10-point win around there, maybe 13-point win. I don't think it's going to be a 3-touchdown score win. I can't see it being over 21 points over the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think that they're going to win by 3 touchdowns. I can see them winning by 2 scores, though. So that's where I've got the Broncos. But again, really what this game is is a chance for the Broncos to get out there and get some confidence back against a team that has not been performing as well as they're expected to in the preseason. They're at a very similar position to the Broncos, where they've got all this offensive talent, much like the Broncos have all this defensive talent, and they just haven't been able to succeed with that. And that's just kind of the story of the Bengals in recent history after their Super Bowl appearance a couple years ago. But that'll do it for your Denver Sports Daily. I'll be back with you guys again tomorrow, hopefully recapping a huge win for the Broncos. But if we see the Broncos lose, which I don't even want to talk about or put in the air, I will have some very, very hard thoughts to bring to you guys tomorrow. But that'll do it for Denver Sports Daily. I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, y'all.